City Council will see at least 3 newcomers after the next election. That's because 3 of Calgary's first-term councillors are also making it their last term. Let's hear from them about why they are leaving. All 3 are in studio for the show.
Hi, I'm Evan Spencer, and I'm councillor for Ward 12.
Hi, I'm Courtney Walcott, and councillor for Ward 8.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Mian, and I'm the councillor for Ward 3.
Each of you is not seeking re-election. I need to ask each of you why separately before we get into any sort of panel discussion. So, Evan, I'll start with you. Why are you not running for re-election?
If you were to boil it right down, I have a pain tolerance.
And it has been exceeded, or you think it's going to be exceeded?
I'd say it was exceeded a little while ago. And when you look down to the horizon on where this journey could go, I didn't see signs of that turning around. Exactly the opposite. So that was a big part of it.
Okay. I think we're going to talk about both pleasure and pain through the next few minutes here, but I'll turn to Courtney next. Why have you decided to not run for re-election?
Yeah, I'm actually never sure that I was ever planning on running for re-election. I spent the last 4 years with a very simple kind of mandate in mind, which is come in, get as much done as possible, and then make the decision. I think a lot of people look at politics as a career, whereas I look at it as a term of service. Get in, do your job, actually serve people, and then move on. Whereas some of my colleagues, what I think they actually do is everything is calculated for the next election, and then they actually never end up accomplishing anything. Whereas I wanted to make sure that we spent this term accomplishing something.
I want to get to Jasmine next because we have to ask you the same question. Why have you come to this decision?
Well, like Evan, I think that the politics eventually got to me, but I think I could have withstood that if the projects I cared a lot about, I had some control over their outcome. So the multi-sport field house is something I'm really passionate about, same with the Green Line. And both of those are really in the hands of the province at this point. And so in order to stay another 4 years, I would have to feel like, okay, I can make a difference on those. But in this seat, I wouldn't be able to. So that was a big factor.
Okay, let's talk about the Green Line a little bit because you announced specifically that you wouldn't be seeking re-election during a debate about the Green Line at Council. Here's a little bit of what that sounded like.
This is the decision you're making today, Council, and I respect it, but I cannot be a part of it. I will not be seeking re-election in October, and this decision is the last straw for me. It turns out, DC, that I have found my sticking point on that spectrum from pure politics to pure governance. I want to be clear that I have immense respect for this corporation and everyone who works in it, which is why I think you deserve to be led by people who fully believe in the direction that they're taking you.
When you listen back to yourself in that moment, it's a little bit of a flashback there. What do you hear from yourself? What are the feelings that are going through your mind there?
Yeah, I think it starts with this premise of, we make decisions on a spectrum of pure governance decisions over to pure political decisions. And I think with the Green Line, we just watched that project get totally absorbed by politics in a way that was just really disturbing to me as a citizen. And, I think that I had always hoped in politics that when push comes to shove, people are not going to throw money out the window. People are not going to be making decisions purely for their own political ends. And I think with that project, I saw that happen. It became a real pawn in a provincial political game. And as city council, getting back to the idea of control, you don't actually have that much control over that. You really are at the behest of the decision-making of the provincial government. And I was really uncomfortable with the way that we were making decisions on that project, being really forced to make a certain decision.
So was it that you felt like you didn't have control, or was it that the process was too complicated?
I think it was fundamentally that the process was too political. And we didn't have control over saying, hey, this is getting too political. Like, we have to make some decisions here over the technical details, over the financial details. But this project really became a big political football between the current UCP government and their political contender, who was our former mayor, Naheed Nenshi.
Just because the Green Line has been so front and center, how much of a factor was that process in your decision here?
There's many layers to the onion. That's the Green Line. But it is a great example of the challenges that are facing this city council. And I'd say all elected municipal councils within Alberta. It is indicative of a trend that shows a willingness to punch down, to make the problems that any institution is carrying right now, serving individuals in our communities. The poop goes downhill.
I'm glad you used that word.
Yeah.
Given it's a podcast, but we still have to follow the what you do in front of a microphone rules at the CBC. When we talk about sort of the way that politics work in this city, you worked for Councillor Shane Keating specifically, so you maybe had a little bit of an idea of how city council works. When you got into office, what didn't match that experience? What parts of being a councillor weren't what you thought they would be?
Well, I remember watching council and being really drawn in by the commentary of some of the members, and then kind of shaking my head at some of the rest that were around the horseshoe, because I was getting paid to watch council at that point and report back. And then really struggling with the kinds of dialogue and the way that was being represented in the public forum. And so my hope when I joined was to be a part of changing that, to elevate the conversation, to build trust and confidence. And I mean, certainly a big part of my desire to not continue this journey is, after great effort, watching how difficult that is. And kind of always feeling like you're caught in a rip torrent.
Yeah. Do you feel like you weren't able to do that then?
Oh, absolutely. Like there was, for the first year and a half, I thought there were these little mile markers, conversations that we would have as a council where we would all come together, and I'd have hope. And have hope that this council was going to be different than the last council. And I know even with some of the really big early challenges with, say, climate emergency, the event center falling apart. There was just one after. It felt like we were in a rapid fire crisis. And I was kind of hoping that would bring us all together. But unfortunately, I had a whole bunch of colleagues that decided to capitalize on that.
So, Courtney Walcott, tell me, how well do you think council works together right now?
Okay, great. It's fine. We don't. In a nutshell, from the larger scale. And I think it really comes down to something that Councillor Spencer said. So what Evan was describing in my experience is like, if you're not on the same page with regards to outcomes, if you don't have the same outcomes in mind, and if your idea of service is different, how you want to help the public, then you're not on the same page, especially because now we're playing on teams. Right. We're not just playing as council, as one team. Now there's internal politics. Half of our elected officials are aligning themselves with other orders of government.
So are you talking then about the soon-to-come party system for municipal elections, or do you just mean informal teams right now?
The party system is really interesting to me, is because what you ended up seeing for the last several years is people on the political right actually accusing council of being politically left. Right. When you look at the people who are making those accusations and the people who are joining parties, it is the right that is actually solidifying their base through the concept of parties. And so there's always been a team on council. There's always been a blue team and an independent team, admittedly. The only problem is that...
And you wouldn't call it an orange team or a red team?
Absolutely not. And realistically, when you look at the types of policy decisions that we've made, if you actually cared about the outcomes that we're driving and the citizens we're helping, then you wouldn't waste time on politics unless you felt your team was losing. And that's what it's been like for the last 3 years. It's been team politics and not Calgary first. It's not been us.
There is the concept that, I mean, it's not a concept, it's official. Each councillor represents specific wards. The mayor is there for everybody. Do you think that the mayor could have done a better job in having council work together? I'll toss that to who we haven't heard from.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to lead a group that doesn't want to be led. And so I think when you think about this councillor, this mayor, I actually think it's not the people. I think it's the structure of the way that we make decisions. I mean, if you look at only 45 to 50% of people vote, then on top of that, very few people are listening to. If you're listening to this podcast, you represent a very small group of people who are hyper engaged. Right?
A small group that we hope becomes larger. You should like and share this podcast with all of your friends.
Exactly.
It's available on Spotify.
Exactly. But the largest group of people that we have in Calgary are the disengaged voters who tune in once every 4 years to make their vote. And they're highly susceptible to, these short messages. And so just because our attention span is much lower nowadays, it's how do you communicate a message in 10 seconds? And as all of us as governors can tell you, the things we're dealing with are just so much more complicated than 10 seconds. And so how do we get good government when you have to communicate what you're going to do in a fraction of the time that is required?
I know that we just scratched the surface, and I don't want this to turn into a complaining session, but I would like to bring up an example of a policy and talk with you folks about how the pushback and eventual repeal happened. And I'm talking about the single-use item bylaw. And so I can already see I'm getting some laughter here.
Why this one?
Well, before the break, we were talking about how people will only pay attention for short bursts. And that's a policy where people understand it right away, but there were a lot of short bursts, right? You were reminded of it anytime you went to McDonald's, Popeyes, Tim Hortons. So, Jasmine, Mian, I'll start with you. Would you have done something differently with that policy?
It's a good question. The policy is in Edmonton and it's working. And I think they'll probably divert a lot of waste from their landfill as a result. But I think maybe what we needed to do is actually talk about the challenge of single-use items. I think one thing as a city councillor is we've all been to the landfill and we've seen it and we know how big of a problem it is.
And that's something that people will take stuff to the dump, but you don't really pay attention to how big it is and how much land you need in the way that a city councillor would.
Totally. And so we're thinking about that larger strategic challenge, and we know that we need to lead our citizenry towards different types of behavior. I think the challenge is fundamentally, especially after the pandemic, people don't like to be told what to do, and they certainly don't want to have to pay for it. And so I think we learned through the feedback from people that there were some tweaks that we needed to make on the single-use bylaw. And I think that's one of the beauties of local government is people could come right in and talk to us and tell us that they were unhappy. And so I didn't see the repeal as a failure. I saw it as, we got the feedback. People aren't happy about this. We're going to have to try it a new way.
Courtney Walcott, I don't want to ask you the exact same question, but how do you think the repeal was handled? Do you feel like it was a case of people being listened to, or were there frustrations that you had?
So Jasmine and I, we voted differently on this, right? And the reason why is because I actually think that what's a better example of people being listened to is actually helping them come in and craft the solution on the fly. And so something that we were doing when we were getting all of this feedback was we were taking a look at the bylaw saying the biggest concern that we are hearing is ironically about fast food. And it's about grocery stores. It's about making sure that we're not seeing excessive waste coming in the form of reusable bags, which people would use the plastic bags as garbage bags. And so the reusable bags, if we're just buying them repeatedly, that's also a problem. And the same with takeout. So I see the complaints, and we were ready to actually make adjustments to the bylaw on the fly, but some people would prefer to start from zero. And I personally believe that what's a better conversation, a better solution is to iterate. How do we say that we started something years ago, hear what people are concerned about, make the adjustments, and try it out? Going back to zero is never really the solution that I want to push.
Evan Spencer, do you think changes at City Council are iterative?
I'd say all good policy is.
But is that what's happening at City Council through your term? Do you feel like it's been iterative is maybe the question I want to ask you.
Oh, I'd say by and large, yes. A lot of good governance has happened amongst the chaos and the politics. When I think of the single-use bylaw, that was just a confluence of a whole bunch of external inputs. Again, a provincial a premier, a newly elected premier that wanted to, get involved.
Not to put too blunt a point on it, but no one in this room is, I can't think of a more polite word for old. No one in this room are older politicians. We all have experience in our various sectors. The three of you are experienced Calgarians, but you're not lengthy politicians. What kind of a message do you think it's sending philosophically to the idea of having people come in from outside of the political realm? You come in for a term and now all three of you are like, I'm out. after significant life experience outside of politics and you're like, I don't want to continue in politics?
I mean, we certainly don't want to send a message that says stay away. One of the reasons why I put my letter out and on the timing that I did is I wanted to be able to engage in a great long-form conversation with my community about the need for somebody who really cares to be ready to go. And when it comes down to the next generation, I think they're all watching those that can stomach it, and obviously the mental health side of it has to be a part of it.
Like your personal mental health in terms of being able to handle the job?
Yeah, and just individuals that are attempting to engage with it, right? The next generation. But I would like to think I've interacted with plenty of really engaged, turned on young folks within our community that want to see change. And if anything, I think the three of us coming in, giving it our all, and saying, okay, peace, we're out, and helping. My hope would be that all three of us stay involved. I get that sense, right?
What would you warn the next generation about, Jasmine, Mian?
I would say, because I came in, I think I was 31 or 32 when I was elected, and I thought that was really important because I think we have a large stake in the future as younger people, and typically politicians were much older, which means that you're going to have decisions that are slanted towards that generation's preferences. We even see that in who comes and speaks to council. It's a lot of older folks. Yeah. And so I think we needed the younger voice. That being said, because of where politics is at, you have to be careful how long you stay in and whether you get pigeonholed into staying forever. I didn't want to be a politician forever. I didn't even really want to be a politician. We are all just, a teacher, a preacher, and an Olympic athlete who walked into City Hall trying to make a difference. And, I think that you don't want to stay too long and become a career politician. And that's something as young people you need to think about. So if you get in, have a plan of what you want to do, execute it, and then you can leave. But if you get tied up into staying for years and years and years, then you see these political people who are just trying to get elected at any level of government because that's their expertise. And that's just not a future I wanted.
What have you found so frustrating through this process of being a councillor?
I mean, we were all newly elected, so we had to drink from the fire hose. And one of the things that I find endlessly frustrating is colleagues of mine and then members of other levels of government that just really lack intellectual humility.
So when you say intellectual humility, do you mean that they don't know what they don't know, or they're unsure of what they don't know, but they have confidence? Tell me more about what that means.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to individuals that have read a news article or one study and now operate as if they are a subject matter expert and govern as if they are a subject matter expert without long-form appraisal of the trade-offs, which there's trade-offs on every single decision we make.
Courtney Walcott, I'll ask you, what do you find frustrating, and what have you found frustrating? What
I find the most frustrating is how often people traffic in anger. Not to be stereotypical and evoke like classical politicians, but I never understood why people don't traffic in hope and optimism, like optimism and abundance. Like we have this belief in Calgary that is so evident in every council meeting, from electeds to the public speakers, is that we don't have enough. We have no room. Everything is a scarce resource, that we don't have space for more people, more things, nothing. Our communities are full, no more. That attitude, it embarrassed me. Because I look at the communities across the city and I see so much opportunity and so much space to include, but there's so much effort and energy put into exclusion.
Emotion is paramount for a lot of voters, but it sounds like you would have liked to see it on the other side of the table for the politicians.
Well, the thing is, like, emotion is paramount to most voters, but it's also the thing that's most easily manipulated. And so there's active and intensive manipulation that happens with people's emotions. And so seeing that the political value from all orders of government, including my own, and one that I've played in, and it made me feel dirty, is trying to make people angry so that we can get something done. It made me feel gross.
Yeah, so this is something that you're not just saying affected your colleagues, but yourself as well.
Oh, no, because you think that you have to play the game, but you don't. And sometimes the easiest way to figure that out is by playing it. And so I have engaged, and it made me feel gross.
Yeah, you played the game, and now you've decided to maybe play a different one in the future.
And I don't want to traffic in anger for the rest of my life.
Councillor Jasmine Mian, what's been most frustrating for you as a councillor, and not specifically what's led you to leave, but what's been the frustration in your heart?
Well, it sounds silly to say that it's politics when you go into politics.
I was going to say, well, I got news for you.
but it really is that. And I think it's, I was an Olympic athlete. I know what it's like to be competitive, and I know what it's like to want to win. But in the public sphere, when people are doing that and when that's the highest priority, if this team wins or this politician wins, it gets back to the point about that Courtney was making around it being more of a zero-sum game. And usually I feel that we end up with worse outcomes when someone's really trying to own the win and dunk on the other group. I think that it's better when we collaborate. I think that there's a lot more abundance than we realize. But unfortunately, the system, at City Council, we vote yes or we vote no. There's a binary, right? And so that the systems are really set up for people to compete. And because of that, I think we get a little bit less.
Well, I really appreciate the three of you coming in. Thanks for talking with us, and thanks for dedicating your time to Calgarians as well. Regardless of your stance on the political spectrum, you've each spent some years serving this community, and I know many people will say thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Anis.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Anis.
You ever wonder why Calgary is obsessed with quadrants? Does this city truly have the Queen of Costco living here? And apparently, people feed coyotes. We'll tell you those stories and more on This is Calgary.